Boundaries. They are so understated when it comes to succeeding in a fitness and a fat loss journey. Because without boundaries, what you have, that effort that you have, the intensity that you have, just simply melts away and completely dilutes into nothingness. Because you're not filling your fitness journey full of that focused energy and intent that you are investing. I want you to imagine a cylinder, a really tall cylinder. And the base is a medium-sized circle, but the cylinder is incredibly tall. And at the very, very bottom of this cylinder is where you are at the start of your fitness journey. And then the very top of this cylinder is where you get to when you finally got to the body and the health that you love and you're really happy with, and you want to maintain that for the rest of your life. The goal is we fill this cylinder full of effort, lessons, investing energy into becoming that version of you. And you might want to visualize it as if you're filling like a really tall cylindrical vase with water, and you want to fill it up all the way to the top. However, throughout this journey of you filling up this cylinder, there's going to be times where there are cracks in the cylinder or holes, and they need to be patched, because otherwise that water is, or effort is, continuously going to be leaking out, being diluted, and you'll never actually get to that point where you want to be. I really do see certain boundaries that are not upheld, and they stop someone from ever being able to get to that level where they desperately want. And until they patch or start applying a certain boundary, they will truly never get to the body and the health that they want. The way that I see boundaries is almost like the equivalent of patching the glass in that cylinder. Whether you're doing it with super glue, whether you're doing it with duct tape, I don't give a shit. It's just the fact that it needs to get patched. And particularly for women, there is something in our DNA where we are so incredibly caring. We're selfless. We're on this planet to nurture, to care, to give, that sometimes the word boundary doesn't even register in our brains, because it seems like an impossible, like it doesn't exist. How is it possible that I set a boundary into place where I say I'm not doing anything for anyone else after this time? And sometimes we genuinely really can't. Mothers, they've got to always put the children first, and perhaps that's a relationship dynamic that you have, is you need to support your partner if your partner is the breadwinner. That very much so might be the case. But there are so many structures that we can put into place that allow us to still do the things that we need to do without sacrificing all of our effort going to waste. And there's one thing, and I might be calling some of you out here, to be honest. I might be. So if you get offended by this, then actually you've got a problem that you need to fix. But some women, and I had it recently as well, with someone using their motherly duties almost as what was an excuse to their journey. Some women will say, well, I've got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to look after everyone and everything else, and woe is me, my life is just so hard because I've got to put everyone else before me. Firstly, it's a privilege to choose to put your children ahead of you. You chose to have children, and yes, sometimes life gets hard and you need to put your children ahead of you, or you choose to put your partner ahead of you. But don't you dare complain about those things as if they're a burden, okay? Your children, your family, they're not a burden. And yes, they might impact your workflow sometimes. And yes, they might impact your pursuit of your career. But do not incessantly complain about how hard it is and how difficult it is. Because I'm sorry, there are so many super women on this planet that just don't complain about the fact that they have a lot to manage, but rather they know they need to manage things as best as possible. And in order for that to happen, they need boundaries and structure in place. Okay. So do not pretend that you're a victim because you've got a lot of things to do. It does not help your journey. It does not allow you to step into the person that has what you want, because the woman that has the body that you want, the lifestyle that you want, the fitness that you want, who can do everything, she doesn't complain about it. And why does she not complain? Well, because she's just figured out that complaining doesn't help, and rather she needs to set the boundaries in place to just be able to do all of it. So with regard to setting those boundaries, what does that look like? And I actually was really thinking quite deeply into this, and I thought there are so many occasions that women forget to set boundaries, and all of their effort goes pouring out of that cylinder, and it never quite gets to the very top where they've reached that ultimate fulfillment. So today we're going to talk about what boundaries are absolutely essential to set into place in a fitness journey, in a health and well-being journey. Especially some will be applicable to women who have a lot of caring duties, but also they're more susceptible to things like comparison and frustration of not seeing imminent results. There is something to be said about human psychology, which is we want results yesterday. I just wanted to take a quick moment to interrupt this podcast episode to tell you how we transform every single woman that comes on board and works with us at Team CBM to wake up energized, confident, healthy, and in complete control of their schedule, nutrition, and exercise. And it begins with a very simple discovery call. It's just a strategy call where we get to understand your goals, your struggles, your life that much better, so we know exactly what you need to do, the roadmap to get to where you want to be as efficiently as possible and in a way that's incredibly sustainable. And it means that your results will last forever. Once you begin the process, you will have everything delivered through our custom coaching app, and your tailored, personalized nutrition plans and exercise plans are created to your preferences. Whether that's home training or gym training, perhaps your nutrition could be a flexible meal plan, or it's portion guides or calories and macro targets, but we design and create that together so that it works for you. Beyond that, you will have daily communication with us if you need it, and you will have a weekly video check-in response from your coach discussing any changes and amendments to be made for the following week. We will always review your progress monthly on a monthly progress review call, and it means that your progress and your transformation is fail-proof. It is guaranteed. Beyond coaching, we provide an extensive educational platform where we include webinars, resources, guides, recipe books. Think about the value that you get in this podcast times 100, including our community of incredible women who support each other through every high and low that you could possibly imagine. So if you're interested in finding out more about joining the world's most trusted and comprehensive online coaching company for women, then all you need to do is click in the description box below to book your complimentary discovery call. And we would love to chat more with you about your goals and to get you feeling the happiest and most confident that you will ever feel. Back to the episode. And I do genuinely believe, from my perspective as a coach, that you should lean into that. Like, as humans, it doesn't change. Like, our psychology will always want to see quick wins. So we need to lean into that and actually make sure that the process at first gives you the proof of concept that it works. So that's why any of our clients who come on board within the first 3 weeks, we're wanting to make sure that they've seen fast fat loss so that they're able to feel confident that, wait, this process works. I can see my body's changing. My efforts are not going to waste. And then if we need to pull back to make it a little bit more sustainable, we can do. That's completely down to client preference, but we find that that really works well. And I don't know anyone that's ever complained about starting a fat loss journey and has seen efficient or fast fat loss results in the first 2 weeks. In fact, in my whole time of coaching over 1,000 people, I have never heard anyone complain that they think that they're losing body fat too fast, ever. So that being said, we need to understand that boundaries apply when looking at your journey, right? A lot of women will say, I haven't achieved this like someone else has, or I'm not quite seeing this like that person has. If we could eliminate any element of comparison and you could just look at yourself and your progress every single week as if no one else in the world existed, would you be satisfied with how you're progressing? And if the answer is no, and you think my progress is not good enough, then that is a sign that there are certain boundaries and expectations that you should be putting into place for yourself. However, if you're thinking, yeah, actually, I'm really happy with how things are going, then the boundary that you need to put into place is to stop comparing yourself to others. And how that might transpire is maybe you unfollow certain people that are influencing your mindset. Perhaps you don't speak to people that like to pass judgment and leave comments on what you're doing, because those people are not helpful. So there's always clues that are left with regard to where your suffering is coming from. Your suffering could be coming from the fact that when it comes to social events, you find yourself significantly overeating. Or perhaps your partner brings home some food in the evening on a Friday night, or before you know it, they've ordered a takeaway. Food's there in front of you. Or you're out at these socials and you find yourself just consistently shoveling food into your face every single occasion and feeling guilt and gluttony and shame afterwards. What is that telling you? There's behaviors there about yourself that you don't like. There's a crack in the cylinder, and effort and water is pouring out of it. So how are we going to patch that? Let's take, for instance, your partner repeatedly brings home takeaway food or snacks after you have confided in them, told them about your journey, you want to lose body fat, and that is hindering the process because it's almost creating an environment where it's a little bit easier for you to go off of track. If you're absolutely ravenous at the end of the day, you spent the whole day working, perhaps dealing with children, and your partner orders pizza, there's no food that's cooked. It's a really difficult situation to be in because you want that 2 pounds of fat loss at the end of the week, but right in front of you is a delicious pizza. You're salivating, it smells amazing, the whole family's digging in. In that moment, unless you've got some crazy amount of willpower, as many women do, might I add, but you would probably end up having some pizza. You might end up eating a whole pizza, maybe just a couple of slices, but afterwards, because you haven't acted in alignment with your goals or the type of person that you want to become, maybe someone who upholds boundaries, you then feel disappointed and upset in yourself. And worst of all, which can happen, you go and self-sabotage. You go and hit the famous fuck it button. And then the next day, because you feel gross, you feel disappointed that you cheated on your diet, you then just go and eat whatever you want throughout the day. And then that cycle continues before 5 days have passed, you've eaten terribly, and then Monday comes along and you're like, right, I'm starting again. Exhausting. Mentally, it's just putting yourself through such turmoil. But what is the one boundary that you could have had in place that would have stopped like literally a whole week's worth of fat loss progress going to waste and to stop you from regressing? And one of the boundaries, actually, whether it's with friends or partners, family members, loved ones, it's confiding in them with real honesty and vulnerability, because as humans we connect when we're vulnerable, to tell them why something does not serve you and why you don't want it to happen. This is something where I'm going to use a client example here, but I'm not going to name any names just to keep it nice and anonymous. But there was a situation where a client did no longer want to vape. It's a health conscious decision moving forward not to want to vape. And the client had explained and asked the partner kindly, I'm worried about this, what this will do to my health. I don't want to do this anymore. Can we agree that we do not vape in the household? I will no longer be purchasing vapes. I don't mind what you do. But can we agree that you don't vape in the house or you don't leave vapes around the house? because that's going to create a triggering environment for me. And the partner agreed. But then after a while, the partner just went back to the same habits, bringing vapes into the home, leaving them around, vaping in front of said client. And it was really challenging for that client to then be able to give up vaping, not only from the fact that nicotine is in the air and the smell of the vape is in the air, which is physiologically quite triggering when you're trying to give up an addiction or move on from an addiction, but also it seems a bit disrespectful from the partner, doesn't it? Really, if you think that the person who loves and supports you wants to help you on your journey to health. So here's the question. Why was the partner not sticking to the boundaries that were agreed? Is it because the partner didn't care about said client and was more concerned about vaping because they wanted to? Perhaps they didn't understand the importance. Maybe the client had relapsed and gone back to vaping, and then the partner thought it was okay. So there's quite a possibility that the partner just didn't realize the gravity of the situation. So there's a lack of understanding. And then there's the option of just complete disrespect and not caring. 9 times out of 10, our partners, our loved ones, really care about us. And so if they're not sticking to a boundary that we've asked and they're not upholding that, it's because of a couple of things. Maybe one, they don't actually understand how important it is to you. So my question is, are you nagging to be like, oh, here you are bringing in the vapes again? Or, oh, here you are buying the takeaway again. I asked you not to do that. Are you actually being kind and caring when you're speaking about what your needs are? Instead of saying, I'm just using the most random name that pops into my head here, but instead of saying, John, for God's sake, you've ordered the pizza again, and I said to you that this week I really wanted to make sure I stuck to my plan, and you're just making it so hard for me and you don't care about me. So that is option one, where you can nag and be negative. And poor John is thinking, but we've spent our whole life on a Friday having a takeaway, and we love pizza, and it reminds me of when we were first together, and it's special and I like to treat you, but you're shouting at him. What is that situation there? That is a whole huge amount of miscommunication. John doesn't understand why not having pizza is so important to you. John feels hurt because he thinks he's doing something nice for you. And then you're shouting at each other. He's calling you ungrateful and you're saying you don't care about me. This might turn into a little bit of a mini relationship counseling example. But the reason why John bought that pizza in the first place is because he loves you and he cares about you, perhaps. However, you haven't communicated with him why it's so important that you lose that body fat and why that pizza doesn't serve you. So if you'd said and sat down and said, John, I absolutely hate the way that I look. I'm so unconfident in my body. I don't want to take my clothes off. I don't want to be intimate with you. I struggle to confidently have sex with you because I hate how I feel in my body. I feel unfit. I don't feel healthy. I feel quite honestly horrendous and it is making me depressed. I feel miserable and I am not the version of me that I want to be for you and the family or for myself. And so this fat loss journey means so much to me. Like, I can tell you that I will be 100 times better wife when I've lost this body fat. And that means that we're going to have to make some changes and you're probably going to have to help me and cheer me on whilst we make these changes. And one of those things might be that instead of having a greasy pizza every Friday, we do something different and that you don't keep doing that because it's really going to make it difficult for me to become the woman that I want to become for me and for you. And then after that, John's going to understand. He's going to be like, oh, it's not that she doesn't love me and that she doesn't care about us making memories together and enjoying food, which is our love language, but rather she just really doesn't feel good in herself. So what happens after that? Well, it's beautiful because vulnerably, John will then say, but I really love our takeaway on a Friday night. And it's something that we've done always throughout our whole relationship. So what are we meant to do instead? I don't want to just eat chicken, broccoli and rice. And then the beautiful thing is that you form a new ritual. You cook together. Or maybe you surprise John with a fake away or something special every single Friday night. Or maybe you ask your coach if you can make an allowance for some type of takeaway on a Friday so that it's extra special. The point is, you set the boundary in place because you come to explain the boundary with love and care. The same thing went with this client and the vape situation. The situation where she really wanted to give it up for her health, and yet her partner was not supportive of that. When it boiled down to it, the partner had a pretty severe vape addiction too. And he was finding it incredibly difficult not to have the vapes with him all the time and to have to leave the home or to go into the garden to go and vape because it made the client feel uncomfortable. But when he was addressed kindly with a questioning of, why aren't you helping me stick to my boundaries? He then admitted that he was really struggling with the vape addiction. And then they both decided that they're going to hold each other accountable because they both didn't want to be vaping. And guess what? Teamwork makes the dream work. If you're in it together, life becomes so much easier. It becomes so much easier to achieve a shared vision, a shared goal. Boundaries are there to absolutely springboard you to get to that higher level, as we've spoken about, but they take very careful and considerate placement. Imagine you're trying to duct tape that cylinder. You're not just going to cut the most random bit and slap it on and hope that it works. No, you're going to have to make sure it's dry. You're carefully going to have to make sure that you're putting that seal on, that it's tight, that it's fixed, because the application matters. Because if you're so aggressive in how you apply that boundary, you're going to damage the process. You're going to damage your relationship if you can't carefully apply a boundary. And this goes to so many things, right? Gosh, this could apply to asking John to do the dishes, right? Because actually it matters so much to you that every so often you're able to put your feet up for 30 minutes and you'd really love for him to do that. And then he might understand why you've been nagging at him. So I think it's really, really helpful that first of all, you're looking at the boundaries that you're setting with other people that are close to you in your environment. After that comes the boundaries that you set perhaps in the workplace, speaking to your manager and making sure that you leave work on time. Or if you're completely overworked and it's causing you to be burnt out, you literally wake up feeling like you either one, don't want to get out of bed, or two, you can't get out of bed, that you have that conversation that you're overworked. Because as soon as you get to that point where your battery is lower than low, your battery is on minus 10%, there's no way that you can show up for yourself and you can eat the foods that you need to get in shape, or that you can exercise the way that you need to get in shape. You're probably not even going to be able to brush your hair or have a shower and shave your legs if you're that exhausted. So before you hit burnout, be firm in speaking to your manager and say, I want to bring the best quality of work that I can do because I love working for this company, but I can't work for this company if I'm literally run into the ground and I feel like a shell of a human who's on the verge of a breakdown. I promise you, if you let me leave work early or have a couple of half days over the next 2 days, I will come back and I'll do X, Y, Z, and I'll do it 10 times better. Because then it's a win-win situation. And being vulnerable and telling someone why something is so important to you really builds that connection. We know that going through hard times with people is what makes that bond so strong and so real. And that can be with anyone. That can be with a partner, with a family member, with a colleague, a manager, with a mentor, with your coach, right? Going and confiding in them about what is happening for you. And that allows a true connection where the other person really respects you standing up for yourself and saying what you will and won't tolerate. And we're so very much in this era where we'll talk about what we deserve from other people, potential partners. But likewise, we need to direct that energy back to ourselves. This is also the conversation that you need to have with you. When you're doing things that don't serve you, you're staying up too late, you're doom scrolling, you're avoiding the task that you know is going to have big consequences if you don't get it done. Maybe you're ignoring someone's messages, or you're not sticking to do the things that you promised. These conversations need to be had with you. Ultimately, that's going to lead to a lot of worry, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress, because you haven't set boundaries in place of, I go to sleep at this time, I wake up at this time, I eat at these times, this is when I meal prep, this is when I exercise, and there are no negotiables, or those are non-negotiables. It's really quite a difficult thing. And I don't want to pretend like, oh, just make a routine and stick to it. We have lives that throw curveballs at us, and different things will crop up as different priorities at certain points in our life. So we have to understand that it's fluid. It does not apply all the time that you go to bed at a certain time or that you wake up at a certain time. But there has to be a framework of which makes you feel better. I know going to sleep at 10 p.m. and waking up at 5:30 makes me feel my best. Because if I wake up later, I feel like I'm behind on the day. Yes, believe it or not. But if I'm not already up, ready and bouncing around by 7 a.m., I genuinely feel really, really behind on my day. Likewise, I know that if I try and work past 8 p.m., my quality of work is not good. I wake up the next day feeling exhausted because I haven't managed to relax well enough before going to sleep. So those are my boundaries. And I know why I have those boundaries. And sometimes I don't stick to them. As I say, we'll have different things that crop up as priorities. Sometimes I get a creative idea late at night and I really want to work on it. And I'm like, yay, I'm going to lean into my creativity. Before I know it, I'm waking up exhausted in the morning, and then I'm not showing up at my best for others or for myself when I've got to go and crush a training session, or because I didn't actually do the meal prep last night and I did something else. And sometimes we have to suffer the consequences of our own actions to realize why having those structures and those boundaries is so incredibly important. An example of this suffering is what I alluded to earlier, which is overeating at social events, or maybe it is allowing yourself to have some of the snacks that are in the office. And then there we go. We've failed on the meal plan approach or the calorie tracking approach or whatever approach we've got, if it's rigid. Okay. There has got to be some form of flexibility, but there is also no flexibility if you don't have structure. I'm going to repeat that. If you want to be flexible in your fat loss approach, you have to have structure first. You can't be flexible if there's no structure first, right? You can't just say like, oh, I'm being flexible and always eat whatever you want, because that's not flexible. That's just doing what you want. But flexing an approach or a structure is possible depending on what is already there in the first place. And if in the first place, you know that, randomly speaking here, I stick to 1,800 calories for my goal to maintain my body weight. Great. You know then, if you have a day of 2,500 calories, that you're being flexible on that day because it's different to your norm. Versus someone who just eats whatever the fuck they want all of the time. They're not being flexible, right? They just don't have any structure in the first place. So with regard to incorporating flexibility, you've got to give yourself permission to do that. That might be something that feels very alien if you don't understand what your basic standard should be to achieve your goal. Also, you might believe, if I'm flexible at this social occasion, or if I'm flexible on some days where there's snacks in the office, it's going to set me back. The chances are, as long as over time you are 90% consistent, then you will make huge progress. So what does 90% look like? Let's boil it down to a week. Let's make this very simple. So let's say within a week, we want to, for 90% of it, stick to your nutrition plan and your training plan to guarantee fat loss. Well, let's say for 10% of the week, you didn't. So maybe 10% of the week, what is that? Like half a day. Maybe for half a day, you didn't finish your steps or get the typical amount of movement in that you were meant to. and maybe there's one half a day, this could be a Friday night or a Friday evening, you actually indulged a little bit more, okay? In the grand scheme of things, over the course of 6 months, if maybe it was only on a Friday night that you'd overeaten a little bit, you're probably still going to lose body fat if for the other 90% of that 6 months you've done what you've needed to. But there's a pattern there that we need to recognize, which is if it seems to be that there's always an exception on a Friday night, then we just incorporate that into the plan. So this is what we're referring to when it comes to elements where you might notice that you trip up, whether that's snacks in the office, certain social events. If you keep tripping up there, it's because you haven't got the appropriate boundary in place. We could say that on the days where you have to commute into the office and there's more team building and there's more snacks available, we're going to set a boundary that you're able to have biscuits, but you can only have 2 digestives, right? That's all we're going to be able to have. Rather than what's been happening where you consistently will go into the office on the days that you have to be there and you end up having 4 digestives, you have a penguin bar, Sally's brought in some muffins, and then you've spent the whole day snacking on baked goods. We have to find that happy spot. What is the amount that you want to have and that we can incorporate in so that you can still achieve fat loss and give yourself permission to do it, and it feels guilt-free because you've set the boundary in place. But it takes knowing yourself and admitting where you've tripped up. It really does. I have a boundary that I've set for myself recently, which is I allow myself 1 day of the week, 1 day of choice, where I take it as a non-tracking day. I don't track my food in MyFitnessPal. Funnily enough, that day is today. The reason being is some days I might have more social events and I don't want to have to track everything because I want to track my food. That's how I want to lose body fat. Someone else might not want to do that. This is just talking about me personally, but I have 1 day a week where I don't want to track. Today, I've got a few socials. I haven't prepped my food because I was busy last night. So today I'm going to take it as an intuitive eating day. It doesn't mean I'm going to eat like an asshole, but it means that I haven't tracked my food today. And I've communicated with my coach. There'll be 1 day per week where I think it's best that we say, I don't track, but I also still stick to really good eating habits. The coach is in agreement. That might mean that my coach then changes my nutrition so that on the days where I do track, they're pulling down the calories so that I eat less on all those other days to account for the fact that on my non-track day, I might eat a little bit more. But does it give me peace of mind to have one non-track day instead of have to meticulously track calories on 7 days of the week, every single day of the month? Yeah, it gives me a whole lot of relief. So we need to set some boundaries into place as to how we give permission for certain habitual behaviors that you don't want to break. I don't want to break the fact that I don't want to have to track everything. I have a friend who tracks everything on MyFitnessPal and has not broken her MyFitnessPal streak for 5 years or more, probably. That's because that's what she wants to do. I honestly could not think of anything worse than having to put all of my food into MyFitnessPal all the time. So I've made it part of my boundaries that there'll be 1 day per week where I don't track. So what's going to be your boundaries that we can factor into your fat loss journey? Is it that takeaway with John on a Friday night? Is it going to be however many biscuits you have when you're going into the office? If you find yourself overeating at your social occasions too, or emotionally eating perhaps when you're stressed, this is also a perfect opportunity to assess how can you add in or patch that cylinder so that there is some support structure to prevent all of your effort from pouring out. God forbid you have a perfect week where you've hit your steps, you've done your training sessions, your body is primed to lose an incredible amount of body fat that week. And then something stressful happens, and before you know it, you've raided the cabinets, the cupboards, you've eaten so much food, you feel bloated, disgusting, gross afterwards, your digestion feels awful, you feel just truly deeply ashamed. And it happens on a weekly basis to the point where it pretty much blows up the deficit that you've created for yourself by putting in all of that work, and you're breaking even every week. You're not losing body fat because you're stuck in this binge restrict cycle. Now, let me tell you, there's definitely some boundaries that you have to put into your place there, or to put into place there. And those boundaries are going to look like, from a deeper level of human psychology, practices that must be adhered to when you're feeling a certain type of way. So maybe, when I feel stressed or when I feel this emotion crop up, I must immediately take myself out of the house, grab my notebook, go sit on a bench in a park and journal these 3 questions, because me being in an environment surrounded by food is not helpful. And then I need to go and process, what thoughts am I feeling? That might, to someone, be like, that's a freaking impossible thing to do, so that's not going to work for me. Okay, cool. Well, then your boundary is, as soon as you start to feel those emotions, I need you to follow a particular 4, 7, 8 breathing pattern for 5 minutes. And I can promise you, after that, you're probably not going to be craving those things or feeling those emotions anymore. And you might be thinking, what the hell is she talking about? Again, it's because you're not an expert. Like, you don't know everything. You don't know all the boundaries that you should be putting into place to stop these things from happening. But there is always a solution. Gosh, when I developed one of my particular structures or boundaries of what I do on a day where I wake up feeling really stressed and anxious, it was so difficult at first. That boundary is, I take myself to a local cafe. It's not too far away. I go for a walk. I do not open my phone. And I journal a specific set of questions and I answer those before I give my attention and energy to anyone else or anything else. That is something that I must do. And I've even before had to cancel a meeting so that I've had time to go and do that. But afterwards, as soon as I've processed that stuff, as soon as I've done a bit of a grounding technique, I go into the rest of the day feeling absolutely on fire, ready and able to function, instead of some people that will go through their whole day literally feeling like a bear is about to eat them. They're in this fight or flight mode. They're stressed. They're overwhelmed. And then what do? Because they're seeking comfort and they're seeking dopamine, they'll be eating shit. They'll be snapping at people. They'll be doom scrolling, vaping, whatever the hell it might be, because you haven't taken the time to regulate yourself first thing in the morning, because you haven't put that boundary into place, which is, no, Millie, if you wake up feeling like this, there is no option. You know what the process is, what you need to go and do, to go and chill yourself the fuck out so you can go about the rest of your day. Because guess what? I was that girl that used to wake up and go and binge her way through the day on cakes and sweets and tasty food and whatever I'd go and buy from the local store, because of how stressed I felt, because of how anxious I felt. And I was stuck in a body that I hated and despised because I couldn't set the appropriate boundaries and expectations into place. Catch my breath after that. I'm just incredibly passionate about having systems to fall back on. Because what we're talking about here is, what is the system of patching the crack in that cylinder so that we know when we've patched it, it's going to be perfect and it's going to allow us to keep putting more energy and effort and investment into that cylinder until it's full and we've got to that position where we want to be. And the system, you probably don't know the system, right? I'll be honest. If you had a huge crack in a pipe somewhere in your building, in your house, your apartment, whatever, would you know how to patch it until the expert arrived? You could try. And maybe it would work and it would hold for a little while. But you don't know until that expert comes in and shows you exactly how to do it. They might walk in and be like, bloody hell, what have you been doing here? No, that's all wrong. And now it's going to take us ages to reverse it. And now we've got to fix it the proper way, which is what I find all the time when we've had certain clients come to us who have tried to heal their emotional eating and done it with very damaging techniques. That's beside the point. But what I am referring to here is there is a technique and a specific strategy to patch that hole, which is the equivalent of putting a boundary in place. You don't know what you don't know, so you don't know the best boundaries to solve the cracks that you've got in your journey. But that is devoid of the point that you still must patch those cracks in order to be able to progress. So identify what those cracks are. Is it stress eating, emotional eating? Is it not upholding certain standards or expectations from loved ones or colleagues? Is it comparing yourself to other people's journey? Is it feeling guilt for the fact that you're pouring time into yourself and you're a mum and you feel like you should constantly be there and be present for others? Whatever those things might be, identify those weaknesses and then let's figure out how we're going to patch that and what boundary you're needing to put into place to fix the hole. But as the expert here, I will tell you the best one. I'll tell you the best boundary to choose and how to put that into place. So if this has resonated with you and you're thinking, damn, like I really know the things that are holding me back, but I just don't know how to fix them. But if someone could tell me what to say or how do I do that, then I would feel so much more confident in this being my new structure. Let me know. All you have to do is drop me a message on Instagram. Send me the word boundary and I'll know exactly why you sent that to me. So then I can start asking you a little bit more about your journey, where things are going wrong, and we can come up with a bit of a patchwork situation together, because it's my absolute pleasure. I've got to the point now where throughout my own fitness journey, I've faced so many of these conversations with loved ones or myself to make sure that I'm succeeding and that my energy isn't going to waste and I can get to where I want to be sooner. But also there's been so many situations with the 1,000 people that I've worked with where they've said, hey, like this is going on for me and it's really impacting my journey and I'm really struggling to be able to succeed. And we've had to come up with the solution together. And when we've put that boundary in place for them, they're like, this is it. This works perfectly. Like this is harmonious now. Everything's flowing in the right way. And I feel so happy with my results. So just from so much experience, I know that it will be very rare for someone to come to me and say that they're dealing with a certain situation that I won't have an answer for you. I hope that you have enjoyed this episode. It's quite a nuanced episode to deal with the psychology of fat loss and fitness, but ultimately it's a no-brainer. You need to understand this and you must have these boundaries in place to succeed. So if you've enjoyed it, please share. Do drop a like as well and leave a bit of a review for me, either if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify. Thank you for tuning in, guys. Much love. If you think that episode was valuable, then you definitely need to go and listen to episode 27, Cortisol, the hidden fat loss killer, why women struggle and how to fix it. It is going to blow your mind and make everything moving forwards so much easier for you. Definitely go and give it a listen.